Thank you all for joining us this evening for What I Wish My Parents Knew, How to Communicate with and Listen to Your Teen. The goal of these forums is to bring youth and their parents and caregivers together. Sorry, there was a message and I got paused me. The goal of these forums is to bring youth and their parents and caregivers together to talk about often tough to talk about topics and to provide information and tools that can help them continue to strengthen their family. Tonight's forum is focused on effective communication. And over the past 5 years of hosting the What I Wish My Parents Knew forums and hearing from families and hearing from our youth, regardless of the topic, communication remains one of the most important ways families can build trust, become more resilient, and ultimately grow stronger. My Parents Knew forums. The forums are a collaborative effort between youth, community partners, including Say San Diego, the San Diego Military Family Collaborative, and the What I Wish My Parents Knew action team. Our youth play a crucial role in co-creating these forums so that they are timely, rich, and meaningful for our youth and families. Throughout the forum, we'll hear from youth as they share their perspectives and experiences with tonight's topic. You'll have an opportunity to join a breakout room with one of our amazing guest facilitators. And then later, you'll have a chance to ask youth leaders and those subject matter experts questions during the panel portion of this evening. So we're going to get started by watching a brief video created by Elevated Leaders as they answer prompts related to communication within their family.
How honest do you feel you can be with your parents?
Honestly, to be honest with you, I don't think that they truly understand whenever I talk to them. And so I usually just give them the tip of the iceberg of how I feel when I talk to them.
For me, that definitely depends on which parent it is, based off of the type of relationship that I have with them. So it definitely depends on what we've already kind of established as ground rules.
Hard to talk to my parents sometimes because they're always busy with work and I don't want to intrude on that and make them worry or something.
For me, my parents aren't completely fluent in English, so it's harder for me to talk to them. So I kind of just have to, just like Daniel said, I kind of just try to explain it in maybe simpler terms, but I know it's not what I really mean.
I feel like if I give them more than the base knowledge, they just won't understand, and I don't really know how they're going to react. So that makes it a little bit more difficult.
Maybe I'd say when I stress out about work or school, and they're kind of just there to support me along the way, and because they also have to work long jobs, so they get the stress that I have to do at school too.
Yeah, my parents, they work a lot and they also have 2 other children to worry about, and then their other family and stuff like that. And so I just feel like they don't have that much time to fully put that into me. I don't know.
I feel like my parents understand the older things in life, but the things that have just recently came to exist, they don't understand as much.
How can you tell when your parents understand you?
Normally, if it's something that they've already gone through, or depending on what kind of advice they give in response, that can normally tell me how much they understand.
I think they understand the more practical issues to me, things that are able to be understood from a robot's perspective, like homework is hard, I need help with this, or I'm struggling with something. But in terms of mental or more psychological, I feel like it's just a bit harder for that.
I think that they understand me when they give me suggestions on the thing. I mean, that's a good way to know. If they keep on asking questions, then I know that they probably don't understand. But also, it could be too bad if they give me too many suggestions. Sometimes I just want to talk to them. So.
How does it feel when your parents understand you?
feels nice.
Feels nice, guys. It's very comforting to know that they can understand where I'm coming from if it feels like we've actually communicated properly.
Yeah, it's great if they're able to relate to you.
Thank you to our Elevated Youth members that created that video. So my name is Stacy Childs and my pronouns are she and her. I'm a youth development specialist with Say San Diego's alcohol and other drug prevention program stationed at Canyon Hills High School, where I have the pleasure of working with so many of these young people you are about to hear from this evening. So a little background on how tonight's topic was chosen, and it's simple. So it's how all previous What I Wish My Parents Knew topics are selected, and that's by youth survey results. So as Shannon mentioned earlier, these forums are built to strengthen communication between parents and youth around tough to talk about topics. So when crafting the survey to help us identify what the forum topic will be, our survey to students simply asked, what's the hardest topic to talk to your parents about? This was a multiple choice question where youth could select like one of 13 different tough to talk about topics, including an other option where students could write in their response. And you will get the opportunity in just a moment to hear what those youth reported out. But in addition to the question, what's the hardest topic to talk to your parents about, the survey prompted a follow-up question. And that was, what makes it difficult to talk to your parents about that topic? And again, you'll hear from the responses in a moment. The survey was anonymous and voluntary. We gathered over 100 youth responses. And so when looking at the student feedback with our community partners and with our youth leaders, we were less focused on the topics that the students selected, and we leaned more into why it's difficult to talk to parents about these topics. And collectively, we agreed that the forum tonight should be around effective communication among the family unit rather than one specific topic like we've done in the past. The student leaders who you're about to hear from next are essentially the voice of their peers. Each one of them will share out a summarized version of how students responded to each of the questions, all while sharing how they feel connected to the topic and their personal experiences and what they see and hear in the community or on campus at their school. And following this, as Ms. Shannon said too, we're honored to have two guest speakers facilitate breakout room sessions where we'll dive deeper into effective family communication, and then we'll close with a panel. So before I turn it over to the youth, communication and uncomfortable conversations are a normal part of life. However, one of the reasons why we wanted to have a forum around communication is because we don't want the young people in our life to feel like they have to navigate life on their own, and that there are adults around them to support them, to validate their experiences, and to help guide them. And hopefully we're creating a space tonight where learning can take place, and most importantly, we can connect with one another. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Kyle first, and he's going to start us off by reporting out the first survey question, asking students what the hardest topic to talk to your parents about is. So Kyle, feel free to unmute yourself and the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kyle Eastep. I'm a junior, and this is not all doom and gloom, because the majority of responses were students reporting that they are comfortable talking to their parent about everything. That was the most common response. And I think that the main reason for this, what most students responded was, is that they felt that they could trust their parents. They could trust that their parents wouldn't spread whatever they were sending to other people. So, and I don't think I could say the same for if I was talking with, I don't know, just some students, because that information could easily be spread. So I think that when I'm talking to my parents, I know that the information that I tell them is confidential. So here's some good responses on the slide here. They let me know I always have someone to talk to. So when my parents let me know that I have someone to talk to, it's not like you have to ask. Because one of the hardest parts is as asking to talk. So if you let them know that you're willing to talk, then it makes it that much easier. And then they are open with their own experience, which makes me comfortable because I know they have experienced something as well. So with my parents, they relate back to their when they were younger and just remind me that I'm not the only one that's experiencing something like this, and it's been going on for 50 years. It's nothing new. So yeah, and then they accept me for who I am and make conversations welcome. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Yeah, trust and what you mentioned, confidentiality and authenticity, right? It's definitely huge when building a safe space for communication, effective communication to take place between parents and teens. So thank you for sharing. And next up, we have Nick Alcorn.
So another response to the question, what is the hardest topic to talk to your parents about? 27% of students reported that the hardest topic for them to talk about with their parents was their mental health, which we defined as like feeling depressed, anxious, etc. All the different things under the umbrella of mental health. And so there were various responses for why students felt it was difficult to talk to their parents about these different things. I'll run through a few of them right now. So a lot of students felt like they could not fulfill their parents' expectations if they express that they're sad, like their parents expect them to be happy and successful, and so they don't want to let their parents down in that way. A lot of students said that they felt like they were telling their parents an excuse that they were talking about their mental health, as if that was their parents would think that was a reason that they were presenting not to have to do like work or something like that, not to have to do their responsibilities. So they felt like mental health was normally considered an excuse by a lot of people. They feel like their parents will dismiss their feelings, or their parents have dismissed their feelings in the past. They say that their parents their parents have said that they had it worse when they were a kid, or they like brushed them off in other ways, or their parents act like they're doing it for attention. And so in a lot of these cases, students either don't feel heard a lot of times by their parents, or they don't think they're going to be heard. And that perception part is a big part of what stops these conversations from happening in the beginning, is the fear of the unknown. A lot of the students on here they don't know what it's going to look like, but they can imagine it in their head, and they can think about all these things that have happened in the past, or what they think their parents will say about their mental health as they express it, but they don't know what's going to happen, and so their fear is keeping them from going forward with that. And another aspect of this is like they're not used to hearing their parents talk about their mental health in general. These conversations don't happen in their household, so a lot of students say that they just don't know what it would look like. And they say that their parents just won't understand, or even that they're part of the problem. Some students feel that way. And then just in general, building confidence and being uncomfortable in general, it's likely uncomfortable for both students and parents. And so that factor is also keeping students from reaching out to their parents or feeling like that conversation is even possible. And one that was particularly impactful was that they don't want to make their parents feel like bad parents. They don't want to make their parents feel like they failed them because they're having mental health issues. So because a lot of people, they feel like their parents have done well, and they don't want to let them down. Like I feel that way in terms of not wanting to, when my parents feel guilty if I'm struggling with something, or if I feel like I should be able to get over something that I need to talk through with them, things like that. And so my personal connection with this is a lot of something that I mentioned before, is the fear factor. A lot of the responses started with something like, I'm afraid, or I'm scared, something like that. And I identify with that a lot. I think it's tricky because the fear, it's sometimes guards you from like the most important conversations that you can have with your parents. And I think in my past experiences, sometimes the most things I was most afraid to talk about were the things that were most rewarding. So I think that's a good thing for both students and parents to think about. A lot of times, this fear that the students are expressing, a lot of parents would probably express in a similar way, or this unfamiliarity. Pushing through that can lead to better communication in the future and things like that. And there's a couple of other factors that we think about when we are talking about mental health, and how students and parents can both communicate about it, and how students can cope with it, like having extracurriculars and things like that. That's another place for students to put their energy and to either find ways to de-stress or find community and things like that. And like a lot of my own mental stability has come from setting aside time to stay organized and or rest, or just to do those things, in addition to being able to talk to my parents and talk to other people in my life, because being able to talk through things, even when it takes courage and discomfort, usually helps the situation feel less impossible. And it doesn't have to be a parent, but a trusted adult or a mentor for students, whoever is in their lives, or whoever, anyone on this call, whoever you are to a student in this world, just being available for advice, or just like a sounding board, that's always helpful. So that's what I got from the answers to this question.
Wow, thank you so much, Nick. He's a senior. We're definitely going to miss him in these forums, but you did a really good job summarizing the survey results and sharing your own personal, authentic experiences. And you're definitely right when it comes to the fear, right? I mean, there's a lot of parents in the room. I'm a parent, definitely relate to all of what you said. So thank you so much for your insightful information. And next up, we have Marissa, and she's going to be sharing the last survey question.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So the main pull from this sort of topic was there's clearly a variety of issues, such as like sexual health, sexual identity, post-high school expectations, issues in the family unit, or like family trauma, as you can see on the screen. And the main draw that we took from that was that it had something to do with the expectations that are placed on kids, whether intentionally or unintentionally, or by society as a whole. There are a lot of expectations that surround us as we grow up. And of course, it's important to set guidelines and boundaries and rules that you and your child both understand. Like in my household, we definitely have rules about like missing assignments when it comes to schoolwork, and losing privileges if you have a lot of those. But that isn't because of necessarily a pressure to academically succeed. It's more about putting in an effort. Like, to contrast to that, I've definitely had adults in my life who, to my understanding, valued me mostly for my academic success, or very much kind of acknowledge students in a way of like, oh, you're very smart. And a lot of the time, this creates this sort of pressure to conform to these expectations that are set to you. And as you can see, when people feel like they're stepping out of line of what this perfect or normal child looks like, they start to become very afraid, and it can be difficult to talk to your parent about that. Some ways to kind of get around this, or to work with this, as have happened in my family, is I have one parent who we very openly communicate about everything. There are very clear expectations. Like, it's very important to draw the line between your parent being your friend and your parent being your parent. So while we do talk about pretty much everything, there are still very clear rules that I have to follow, and that are important to kind of guiding me through life. But in the same way, my parent has always been very understanding of how I have grown as a person, or how I have evolved as a person and changed throughout my life. In contrast, I've had family members who have definitely pressured me when it comes to what sort of colleges I'm going to go to, or why am I not dating yet, and topics such as that. And in addition, like, there's definitely been some pressure surrounding alcohol throughout my life. So overall, it just can be very difficult to see what sort of expectations you're placing on your kid, or what they are like very afraid of stepping out with. But ultimately, what it boils down to is just keeping a very open mind with your child, and making it very clear that you are willing to kind of grow with them as to be like solely a disciplinary figure. I mean, we don't all start off as perfect parents. Like, it's very much about growing with your child and evolving with your child and the person that they become to be, and to sort of kind of accept them as they go while still staying in that sort of parent role. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. Beautiful insight. You summarized the survey results wonderfully, and thank you for sharing your experiences as well. So next up, we're going to move to the second part of our segment, and Blaney is going to introduce that segment. Blaney, feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Blaney. I'm a ninth grader at Claremont High School, and thank you to the youth who shared on behalf of their peers. We're now going to transition into the next segment of the program, which in just a moment, you'll have the opportunity to self-select into one of 2 breakout rooms. Each breakout session focuses on strengthening communication within the family unit. The first breakout session will be led by Ms. Benita Page, who is the program director of the Tariq Khamisa Foundation. It's a local nonprofit that conducts an array of programs that teach restorative principles and strategies. Benita Page has over 40 years of experience in social service programming. The services include school-based curriculum and a parenting workshop. To support families, TFK's parenting series emphasizes mindfulness, valuing family bonds, disciplines to teach, healing, and strength-based parenting. All families have challenges, and how they restore them, those situations can help them thrive. The second breakout room will be led by Ms. Yasmin Elbenya. She is an associate marriage and family therapist, where she supports adolescents struggling with substance abuse and mental health at the North Central Teen Recovery Center. In her free time, she likes to hang out with her cats and play Stardew Valley on the Switch. In today's breakout sessions, you will learn 3 communication skills and how to implement them in everyday relationships. So in a moment, you'll see a white box on your screen that will give you the opportunity and the choice to self-select into one of these breakout rooms. When you choose the breakout room, please stay in your original choice until the session is over. And then in about 30 minutes, we'll come back together and do a panel Q&A session. So there should be a box, I think.
There is a box, so you'll click.
It's the 4 boxes in your next to your share screen in like the bottom right-hand corner, I believe.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm gonna get
out of the breakout rooms.
I think so. And I think Danny's going to share his screen in just a moment. He's probably just switching over from one thing to the other. Hope everybody found some real value in their breakout session. I certainly did.
Okay, so I just wanted to thank the facilitators for the breakout rooms. I was in Miss Benita's breakout room, and she had a lot of great talking points, and I think she had a lot of great lessons that as a youth I can take away, and as I think parents can take away as well. We're going to transition into our next and final segment of the evening, which is our panel, and we will hear a little bit from some of our youth leaders as they share their perspective, along with our facilitators, Ms. Benita and Ms. Yasmin. If you do have any questions, you can answer them enter them in the box. And I would like to turn the floor to Sophia. And Sophia is a senior at Canyon Hills and has participated in the What I Wish My Parents Knew program for the last 4 years. Sophia, please feel free to unmute yourself and begin this portion of the program.
Thank you for that little introduction. Hi, everybody. My name is Sophia Gilmore, and I'm currently a senior at Canyon Hills High School. And I'm just going to be asking a few questions for our youth, Nevaeh, and for our 2 subject matter experts. So let's begin. My first question is for Nevaeh, our youth, and I wanted to ask you, what could parents do to make it easier for you to come and speak to them about difficult subjects?
Okay, my name is Nevaeh, and my response to that question is I think parents could like remove the blame from things instead of just like lashing out at things, like because sometimes it's like easier to get angry at your kids for doing something instead of actually trying to express and communicate like, hey, that makes me feel X, Y, and Z, instead of just like automatically just going like, why would you do that and all that. That's all.
Thank you. That was a great response. I definitely can relate to, because I know that when you go to someone in a vulnerable position and they lash out with anger, it makes you not want to come back and instead internalize those feelings or shut down, rather than having a parent who's open and supportive and just wants to help you and doesn't have that negative feedback to you just wanting to talk. So now my next question is for our 2 subject matter experts. I'll start with you, Ms. Benita, and the question is, what can parents learn from their teens?
I think parents can learn a lot from their kids. And I want to talk about what parents need to remember as they learn from their kids, because I think this is some of what it's a gift kids give to us, because they help us remember who we are. And here's the first thing, that our kids remind us to have grace as we interact in our families. They need that. They remind us, and we can learn from them, that it's important that we're supporting their wonderment as they discover the world and as they learn and grow. The next one is, it is important as a parent, we are role modeling, that we see how our kids role model for us humanity and humility. I think our young people are very humble and very aware, and we can learn from that, because I think as adults, we stop operating in those places sometimes. And the last thing I want to say is we can still learn perseverance from our kids.
That was really beautiful. Thank you. I definitely agreed with you on we aren't perfect and we're still both trying to grow, and we need to understand and respect that on both sides. I wanted to ask Ms. Yasmin the same question for you, and I'll restate it. What can parents learn from their teens?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And in my line of work, we talk about how the client is the expert of their lives. And I think sometimes parents feel like, although they have a lot of wisdom and guidance to offer and share, kids usually are the experts of their feelings and the things that they're going through, right? It's very personal to them. And once they invite and welcome the parents into those struggles and ask for the support or accept the support, then they can make some really, great work strengthening their support system. But just knowing and being mindful that they are the expert of their struggles. They know what's going on. And a lot of times they might even know what they need from you, but they're not sure how to ask for it. They're struggling with it. So I would say just listen to them. We talked about active listening in the breakout session. So instead of looking for a solution, a lot of times kids really just need their parents to listen and just really strive to understand what's going on.
Definitely. I think another way to say that is to validate their feelings, right? To know that we're not crazy or we're not like being too emotional or what we're going through isn't valid. But, you know, we are experts in our own lives. We know how we're feeling and we just want to get better or just share what's happening with you in a trusted and welcoming space. Thank you both for that response. I'm going to now transition back to our youth, Nevaeh, and ask you, the next question is, what do you think are some common misunderstandings that parents have about their kids or what it's like to be a youth today?
I think some things that are common misunderstandings between parents and teens are probably disrespect and boundaries and like what our generation is like, as well as like relationships and friendships and things relating to sex, drugs, sexuality, and who you are. Going back to disrespect, I think it's like easy for parents to say that because you're talking back and trying to like say how you feel, they like put that in the category of you being disrespectful. I don't know why, but it's just like something I've experienced when I'm trying to like express how I feel and they don't feel like you're doing it the right way. I don't know. And with boundaries, I feel like when you say you don't want to do something, it then leads to them like trying to question you and try to make you like feel like, oh, well, why do you have this? Or why don't you want to do this? And like they keep on pushing eventually. And then when you don't want to do it and you have attitude about it, it just turns into this whole thing. And with our generation, I feel like a lot of parents, they read a lot of stuff online and they like automatically assume that that's right instead of like actually asking. Like they like, I know I get it because, you know, sometimes it's more easier to like, you know, ask other adults because they feel more comfortable and they don't want to have that awkward conversation. But it's just like when they assume stuff, it doesn't really give the right communication between the two. And things relating to relationships and friendships, I feel like parents, they'll just like blow aside your emotions because they feel like, oh, you're too young to even know what this is or what that is. And they don't really consider that you have actual feelings that, you know, are serious enough for them to like actually talk to you about. And things relating to sex, drugs, and sexuality, I also feel like they just feel like you're too young or like you're like not old enough to know about these things, but you do. And then it's like hard because now you're just like left with unanswered questions because they don't want to like realize that you're growing up or yeah, that's all.
Thank you. You made a lot of really great points, to be honest. One thing I didn't think about with this question that you actually mentioned was the communication barrier between the generations, because we as youth right now, Generation Z, are living in a very different time period, right, than when our parents lived in, because we have access to all this technology and we've grown up with it and we really understand it, while the older generation didn't really have that from such a young age like we did in the same capacity. So that creates these barriers within, they may not fully understand what it's like to be a youth today because it was a very different experience for them. Thank you so much. I'm going to go back to our subject matter experts. And this question is directly for you, Ms. Yasmin. Do you have any advice on how to strengthen the bonds and connections between parents and their youth?
So any recommendations to strengthen the bond for parents and youth? So I think to start off is I go back to building rapport, and really what that means is establishing or reestablishing that connection between the two people. We talk about communication, but if there isn't a connection yet, then it's hard to communicate without it. And so empowering your child is extremely important, in my opinion. When children feel like, when they're being put down to feel like they don't have the abilities or the capabilities to approach the situations or the conflict, they're going through a lot of things that maybe, like you mentioned earlier, parents don't understand with the internet use and just being just having a different I want to say different experience with many different things, whether it comes to access with substance use or sex and sexuality. So empowering your child to ask them what they need from you. So if I was a parent and my child felt like they couldn't come talk to me, I might ask them what they need from me. I might ask them, like, how can I be more helpful for them, or someone who they feel like they can open up to. Chances are they'll tell you, and chances are they'll tell you something that, is it's a struggle right now. So maybe it's listening, maybe it's not judging, maybe it's not making it about themselves. These are things that I hear in my sessions all the time, where it's like parents are just like, oh, well, where did I go wrong? Or, oh, I'm such a bad parent, and things like that. Like, these are things that can really make or break a conversation when you're not actively listening to the child. And so, and I say child, and really I mean teenager or the youth, but separating judgment and shame from the conversation. It's unhelpful. And once you kind of establish that that's not going to be a thing, conversation free of judgment, it allows a little bit more of openness and honesty to build that bond. It kind of reminds me of the balance between being a friend and being a parent. A parent doesn't have to encourage bad behavior, right? Like, maybe a friend was like, oh, that's hilarious, like, let's keep doing that. A parent doesn't have to do that, but they don't have to judge them either. There's a healthy balance between, like, understanding that someone, like, their child did something wrong, but not shaming them for it. And really taking that opportunity to educate them and increase their awareness of how maybe something they did is really harmful or really unhelpful. So I think it comes down to intentionality and being judgment-free, honestly, in a conversation.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that too. I think that I've heard stories and experiences where people or where youth are trying to talk to their parents in an open and honest way because they want to fix the issue and they want to kind of get closer while still being able to discuss what's happening. But they're met with this, well, I guess I'm an awful parent then, or you know what, I do so much for you, like I can't, this is like get over it, like things like that. And that's not very helpful for us because we're not trying to blame you or make you feel bad as a parent. Instead, we just want to have an open discussion and a conversation and fix things and move forward, because most of us want to have a close relationship with our parents, right? My next question is going to be for all three of you. I'll start with Nevaeh, our youth, first. This is a question that someone from the audience submitted, so thank you. And the question says, if a teen needs something from their parent, but doesn't know how to ask them for help, if a teen needs something from their parent, but doesn't know how to ask for help, how can a parent help them ask the question? And Nevaeh, that's for you first.
I would say maybe they could like guide the question, like maybe like ask questions leading up to what they may want to talk about. like, how are you feeling? And like, they can go off that. Other than that, I don't really know.
No, that was a great response. Definitely just kind of like opening us up a little bit and just kind of getting the ball rolling. And through that, we might feel more comfortable to be able to ask it. I'll ask you, Miss Benita, that same question.
If someone's struggling with talking about something, that means something's a problem. And we have to recognize that as a parent. And we have to create safe spaces for our children to be brave enough to find and use their voice, because we're not going to know how to support and help them until we allow them to have their voice and we get out of the way of, like we're putting up barriers because we don't know how to handle it. We got to stop. We got to move our barriers and be a little vulnerable, be brave and vulnerable at the same time, because our kids need us. That's the bottom line. Our kids need us to be present and there for them and be that safe and well landing spot. Even if we don't have the answers, they need us to sometimes just be that, because they need us to be those protectors and those people who want them to be at their best. And so we have to, as parents, recognize if our kids are feeling challenged, then there's something going on, and we have to allow for that space. And if, as parents, we have to recognize our limitations too, and we have to know where the resources are that can help our kids, because as parents, we don't have all the answers. And so how do we support our kids in getting the answers and to be there? Because it may be things we both need to listen to, so we know how to go forward. But it's about, being brave and admitting that, hey, something is going on because the communication is not like it should be. And we got to look at how we kind of together go through that.
Great. Thank you so much for your response. And lastly, we'll hear from you, Miss Yasmin. Your thoughts on the question?
I think Benita said it very beautifully. It's the one thing that comes to my mind, though, is remembering to foster confidence in your children and that safe space so that they are able to come and talk to you. But when that isn't happening, there is a problem. There's something rooted, and we need to be able to recognize it, and we need to be able to address it. And I think I don't know what people's experiences are like this, but sometimes it's easy to get complacent to these things. It's easy to be like, well, they'll figure it out, they'll deal with it, they'll get over it, whatever's going on. But unfortunately, that often just kind of, it starts to brew, and it gets worse and shows up in different parts of their life, whether it's schoolwork or their friendships or even getting into substances. So I really think having an open communication with your kids is really important as a starting point from the beginning. And I mean, I've seen parents share their own struggles with certain topics, and maybe that helps kids kind of like think, okay, they do know what I'm talking about. They're not completely separated from this generation where kids often feel that way, right? But the reality is there is a lot of overlap between generations, and I think that parents have an opportunity to kind of share their own struggles. Very little, but just say like, look, I've been there. Like I've struggled with a breakup. I struggled with a friendship breakup, or not being able to concentrate in school or things like that. So opening up the dialogue, initiating that conversation is really important.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because I know from my own personal experiences, sometimes there's a pressure, and I know a lot of other students can relate to this, of kind of being perfect. And I know we talked about that earlier too, in like relation to your parents and seeing them as these perfect people that haven't struggled. But when you hear your parents struggle through something similar, like school, like hearing that, when they were young, they didn't get all great grades, or they had a year where they were off, it really just makes them seem more human. And it's like, well, you know what? They struggled, but they ended up doing great in their life and they're happy. And that can happen to me too. Just because I'm struggling now doesn't mean I'm always going to feel like this, or things aren't going to get better too, which I think can help a lot of young people and people in general. Thank you so much for your 3 responses. We're going to go back to Nevaeh for a question stating, if you are not seeing eye to eye with your parents, what is your typical response, and do you reach a middle ground? And if you are able to reach a middle ground, how did you do that?
Well, usually with my parent, we don't reach a middle ground. She just like makes the best decision, I guess, that she thinks the best decision is. And she's usually like ranting or yelling, so I just like stay quiet because she just gets more angrier if you like try to talk over her or try to speak over her. So yeah.
Yeah, so would you say that those experiences kind of has pushed you to just not really kind of share your experiences or talk back or just like explain your side, because you just know that no matter what you say or how like eloquently or how calmly you try to put it, you're not really going to be able to kind of break down the wall and get to some middle ground?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
Thank you.
it's always been like that. So yeah.
Yeah. This is a prime example of why communication is so great. And I just wanted to say thank you for being vulnerable and sharing those experiences, because they really do help get people to grow and things like that. So thank you so much. I'm going to now ask our subject matter experts a question. This is for Miss Benita. If parents have a major moment of conflict with a child, how would you suggest a way to reopen or to reestablish communications if both parties aren't really talking?
When conflict happens and then it stops. And so what we're now dealing with, and why people will sometimes go to neutral corners, is what we're dealing with now is everybody's feelings and thoughts and the impact of that conflict. And so how you're going to have to start to resolve it, particularly from a parent perspective, is you're going to have to look at how, regardless of those reactions, how do you as the parent still come from this place of unconditional compassion and consistent support? So while while the young people are kind of dealing with all those feelings and whatever, they're kind of left with that conflict, that once again, you're showing your kid you're that safe space that they can come to when they're ready to kind of talk about that conflict. And you have to kind of not keep that conflict in front of you either and judge your kid based on that conflict. You have to kind of also be in that place with yourself of being open and unconditional. And so everybody's got to kind of take that breath, and you can look at that separation as that opportunity to take a breath so you can come into it from a different, from a better perspective, and you can be present in how you're going to kind of process it. And when you process it, you got to process it without judgment and using the that kind of pointing and trying to place blame and place guilt, when it's really about how are we going to move past this. We need to, you got to move past it, and then you can kind of reflect back on why it happened. But you don't have to start with the blame. You got to look at how are we going to kind of go on, because we're a family. And I want to support you as we kind of move past mistakes, because mistakes and chaos and things happen. That's life. That's the reality of life. And so we have to look at how we move through those things in a way without judgment, without blaming, so that we can end in a place of having that unconditional compassion and support to problem solve, because that's really what it's going to be about. It's about problem solving, not about blaming and not about judging.
Great, thank you so much for that response. Now, with only a few minutes left, we're going to go into our last question, which is for both of you subject matter experts. I'll start with Miss Yasmin, and the question is, if a parent is, please share 1 to 2 things that families can put into practice this week to improve communication.
So for anyone who was in my breakout session, you know that I'm really passionate about certain communication skills that I think that we often have a hard time just practicing, just because maybe we didn't learn it. So increasing our awareness is the first thing that I would recommend, like how we communicate, right? Are we actively listening? Are we using reflective listening? Are we, instead of just doing passive or reactive? So first, just starting off to being aware of that. And then after this, this event today, I would talk about what does the communication look like in your family? Maybe having a conversation and identifying what are the barriers and what are the strengths. So once you do that, think about what are the next steps. Does that look like practice reflective listening? Does that practice active listening? I would say for each parent here tonight, just take your next conversation with your teenager, just practice active listening and seeing what it's like to not try to respond to each thing they're talking about, or maybe having a question, and of course, free of judgment. So it takes time to develop these skills, but practice makes progress. And like I said earlier, being patient with yourself and treating yourself with compassion and grace. These skills are not, something you'll learn overnight, but starting off with active and reflective listening with your teenagers.
Thank you. And we got a question from someone from the audience asking for help or any suggestions to help me persuade my 16-year-old son to participate in therapy, as he's very against it. Do either of you have any advice for this person or any way they can try to go about it?
In my experience, just like depending whether the kid is forced to go into therapy, I have found ways to kind of get their buy-in. So what that means is, like, what can they get out of therapy? Maybe it's not focusing so much on what their parents want them to work on, but something that they identify or recognize that they can benefit. Maybe that's just, I don't know, like, maybe it's just talking about what's going on at school. Maybe it's just getting them to learn how to problem solve their conflicts with friends, something that just feels more personal to them and away from what their parents might want them to do just yet. It's really getting your foot in the door. So it really just depends what the situation is, but having your 16-year-old son understand, like, I would be cautious to make them feel like there's a problem and that they need to go to therapy, but really have them, like, identify what's going on. Do they see that there's something that's stressing them out or bothering them? Are they struggling with something? And could they get help? And maybe they don't want to talk to their parent, but they would rather talk to someone that, maybe is a professional, someone they don't know. So I would call that, like, more of a collaborative approach, instead of trying to get them to just be convinced or give in, but maybe more collaboratively and seeing if they see something that could be beneficial to process and learn from.
Thank you for that response. Ms. Benita, do you have anything to add?
I don't have anything to add to that, but I want to ask you, can I answer your previous question about advice?
Yes, 100%.
Here's something I want to say, particularly to our parents. I think one of the ways we stress out and pressure our kids is that, there's no such thing as a perfect kid. It doesn't exist. And I think we put a lot of pressure and stress, unnecessary pressure and stress on our kids, and then they in turn put it on themselves. And so we have to realize life is messy and chaotic, and we're all going to make mistakes, and we have to be present and support our kids through those things, and instead of kind of pushing them towards an unrealistic expectation of perfection, especially because sometimes those are our expectations, not our kids. And that our kids have a right to find their own lives and have their own expectations and growth. And we're there to support them through that, because they will be okay when we do that.
Thank you. That is the end of our panel portion. I just want to thank all three of you for your great responses, for sharing openly and honestly. This was an amazing panel to be a part of, and I'm so happy I got to work with all of you. I'm now going to transition it over to Ms. Shannon to do the closing statements.
Wow, I have so much to say, but we have 1 minute. So thank you all to our youth leaders, our community partners. This was really great as being somebody that helped kind of coordinate this, but also as a parent, so many things stood out to me, giving grace, offering compassion, being open, and understanding there's potential for growth. And I'm really thankful. I hope everybody that attended really found value in what they heard tonight. I do want to say for upcoming What I Wish My Parents Knew forums and some of our other programming, you can see on the screen, that's my email and Stacy's email. And then you can follow us on our social media channels. The San Diego Military Family Collaborative, Lincoln, Real Connections, NCPC, Stay San Diego, and Club Elevated. We post frequently about things that we have upcoming. And I'd like to pass it over to Yasmin. If there's anything you'd like to share about upcoming program that families can get connected to.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, I work for the North Central Teen Recovery Center. I'm a substance use therapist / counselor. So basically we do individual counseling, group counseling, family therapy, pro-social activities, weekly drug testing, and things of all that nature. We work with schools and in the community, so we're able to go to people's homes, have sessions at the site, or even just like at a park or things like that. So there's a lot I could say about our program, but I think it's amazing. And if you would love to learn more, I'll send an email, my email address, and then I believe there's a flyer that will be presented here.
And I think Stacy is going to put the link to the flyer in the chat as well. Benita, if there's anything that you'd like to share, feel free to unmute yourself. And if families are interested in getting connected to any of your programs, feel free to share them.
Well, we offer a 3-session parenting program that really looks at, how do you parent from the perspective of some of the restorative principles I shared today. We're going to be offering the classes in person in April and May at a couple of elementary schools, Valencia Park and Perry, in this coming April and May. But we have other opportunities if there are other places that are interested. We're hoping we can do it as either an online program or we can do it in person. And so both Stacy and Shannon have my email. And if there are other schools that are interested in something like that, the sessions are about 90 minutes. But parents walk away with a lot of new skills in terms of how do you kind of process our kids' challenges and our family challenges.
Thank you so much. And we just appreciate everybody's time for taking time out of your evening to be here and learn ways to strengthen your family. And we really appreciate you and have a great evening.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.